Amazing.
Yeah.
Shall I start? And I'll start sharing my screen.
Yep. Let me just quickly introduce around, and then I think
Oh,
we
yeah,
will
sure,
start
sure.
this jam. So I think it's so, folks. This is a ISAIL Open Bio joint dialogue. We have it like that of a virtual uh, fireside chat, and this is me, ISAIL President Abhivardhan. Uh, Today it's an interesting time because we had planned this dialogue like a month and so ago, and
Yeah,
we have been waiting that we should do this now. But finally, the dates were aligned, and we were able to have this discussion. It's also one of our ways to open up and enter into the world of bioresearch plus AI nexus in a way to see what's happening. Um, there are some really genuine entrepreneurs who are running startups and labs, and I was like, I always came across Ravi's work via Open Bios. I was like, let's have that conversation and see how far it expands per se. So, uh, happy to have Ravi from Open Bio, who will definitely explain his use cases first and definitely stress upon that, and then I will engage in fireside chat. And to add on that, we have Bogdan Grigorescu, who is a convener of the advisory council of ISAIL, but somebody who's a tech veteran, has been a tech veteran for 25 years in UK. And well, with that, we also have Mridut Pal from the ISL Secretariat, just to give a motivation sense. But that's there. So to take this conversation, obviously, Ravi runs a startup in AI and BioNexus, specifically Gen AI and BioNexus, which is Open Bio. People can also say that it's openbio.ai, but then again, the thing is, it's more about the philosophy and the practice aspects of what his solutions entail upon. So I don't want it to be caricatured as open AI is open bio stuff, something like that. Like people sometimes, make that assumption in their minds on a funny note. But I think Ravi is the best guy to, explain what he does, and he also went somewhere interestingly for presenting his solution. So I think we'll also discuss about those bits with him. So Ravi, here you go.
amazing. Thank you. I'll just start sharing my screen. Let me know once it's visible to you.
Sure.
Is it visible now?
Yep.
Cool. I'm not able to see you guys. Wait, let me just figure that out. Oh, forget it. So I'll introduce what OpenBio is. So OpenBio, if you are aware of about Cursor, it is much easier to understand what OpenBio is. But the whole idea behind OpenBio is that it's an AI native platform to make biology research a bit more accessible, because there are so many tools out there. There's so many things out there. So many databases. There's a lot of data analysis that biologists need to do. So the whole idea is to bring everything into one place where you can chat with the platform itself and get a lot of your work done essentially. And with this, the idea is that it's going to make biology research a lot more accessible. Like Cursor has made programming a lot more accessible. So why OpenBio? So the point is this: there's inaccessibility majorly. Many of the biologists don't have the required tools. There's AI coming in. There's so many AI models from protein design. All these things are not accessible because they require GPUs. They require a lot of compute, etc. And so many of the tools are essentially fragmented. And this leads to inefficiency and slow discovery. So our idea is to bring everything into one platform, facilitate that. So who is it for? So it's for AI researcher and even college students who are working on their projects or reading research papers or querying databases in the biology field. Anybody who fits this profile can use it. And I mean, we've had a lot of achievements so far. We have researchers from Yale, Stanford, all these people using it. We were featured on a Chinese platform as well. They were talking about us. I found out through one of our users who was from China. that he mentioned that because they're not on Twitter essentially, so he found out about us through their social media platform. Not sure what it was, but yeah. So that's the overview about OpenBio. And we what all is there. I'll give you a very brief of what all is there, because I want to keep this discussion not a lot about OpenBio, but about bio AI, bioethics related to AI in general. So what all is there? We have 150 plus tools. You can do workflows ranging from reading research paper to designing primers, certain capabilities like predicting protein structure, designing proteins. We have a lot of tools. We have specialized UI, as you can see here. And then there's a lot more coming essentially. So that's the whole idea about OpenBio. So in case you have any questions right now.
Sure. I think it's nice that what you try to do is definitely you try to create different workflows and, let us say, a better way to say, different portals of doing research.
Yep.
Now, there are, I think, a bunch of issues which I am particularly interested to discuss about, such as vendor lock-in and other aspects.
Mhm.
But I'd like to see your perspective also in terms of how does it create that, yeah, I would say, platform, because
Mhm.
I think right now, because of the LLM landscape, wherever it is going, what we are seeing is that so the idea behind the current LLM vendor startup relationship is that anyone who comes up in a solution in any sector,
Mhm.
there is a sense of intermediary, basically. So
Mhm.
obviously, main company with frontier models are intermediaries in their own right. However, beyond the point, they are not. Therefore, they shift that to a consumer, to somebody who's using the API, to somebody who's building their own structures and everything. And that is nested and that is fragmented in future.
Right.
And that's interesting because in the bio side, if I understand, obviously there are the other strands. I also know Parmita Mishra, who's running Precigenetics, which is a very offline startup also in some ways.
Yeah.
She's literally doing real life research and then infusing use of LLMs and alternative AI. So I think that in some way, OpenBio is also kind of an intermediary in its own right,
Yep.
because it has its own relationship, and that matters a lot for anyone who's a researcher. Because I discussed about vendor researcher relationship in a session for Manipal. I was there because they were like PhD scholars from medical side, engineering, architecture, whatever. They were not any law scholars. So I was merely discussing and trying to understand their issues. I created a framework for them. So from an intermediary standpoint, how interesting is it for you? How challenging has it been for you? What do you think about it?
I mean, of course, it's challenging because you need to bring all these tools, right? And a lot of the biology research is already open, so we don't have to deal with a lot of companies who are making these products, who are training these models, because most of the tools are already open source. How we see it is, how do we increase accessibility to even those? Because see, these tools are made by researchers. They're not made by proper software designers essentially. So even when they are there, they're through command lines, they're through so many of the stuff that normal biologists would not be able to do essentially. So it's more of like a, how do we make it much more easier to use? Because eventually how I want it to go is like, there are 14-year-old programmers, right? I want 14-year-old biologists as well. They should be able to do significant work in the field, even while they're not in a lab essentially.
That's a good take, because I think uh, it will also be about how do you use not just the workflows but also the kind of data and metadata ecosystems. And I think that is something we will also come up in. But since you have very well explained, and I kind of get it, that, and this is something which is being tried in legal tech also.
Yeah.
For example, I think there was some, yeah, there are enterprise legal tech companies and merger matters, handling the securitization of assets and all that. And they have been pre-LLMs, by the way. So there are 10 to 12-year-old companies. I know I had interviewed one for Legal Wire, which is by the name of Cubic Tree. So they handle all the merger transactions, and they have some very good data and cases and stuff. And based on that, their machinery works in the software side, obviously. But I think wherever, and I'm 100% sure they must have created any algorithms, because without that, they can't just come up with workflows, even if it's just minor linear regression or something at a huge level of evidence or anything, alternative AI or whatever. So it's interesting. Like you explained about this aspect, can you exemplify with any one instance, I think, on what did you build up when it comes to, this is more handy for people who are into biology science and medical science per se, and not somebody who's just a product manager or a software developer? So how is it different? I think, example.
So, see, the platform in terms of making it is complicated because first, let's say you want to predict the structure of a protein, right? How do you build that understanding in the your orchestration system, which is mainly run by LLMs? But then how do you design those tools that then LLM can use it essentially, right? So that is where a lot of the work goes. And then how do you make sure, because see, biology research is not a short horizon task, right? Most of the LLMs that you use, let's say if you take example of chat gpt, when you go there, it's a short horizon task. You have a question. Let's say you want to know what are the best restaurants in Malaysia where I am, right? It's a short horizon task. You'll ask, let's say, one or two queries. That's it. But when it comes to biology research, it's a long horizon task. You'll have one question, and you're exploring a few more hypotheses. You have to go back, you have to go forward. So how do you make sure that throughout this process it's all coherent, essentially? And then there is a lot of stuff out there. ChatGPT has access to a few tools, essentially, but in our case there's like 150 plus tools, and I've not updated the number. It's much higher than 250 now. So how do you make sure it finds the right tools, uses them in the right way, uses them in the right sequence, right? Because if you're trying to take the work of the boring work essentially away from the scientists, how do you make sure that they are able to trust it, that once I give it to OpenBio, it's going to do it well, essentially? So that is the hard part. And deploying these tools, making sure they're up all the time whenever the researcher needs them, that's also very hard. So it's more of like an engineering problem. I won't say it's essentially a biology problem, but it requires a lot of biology understanding as well, because if you don't understand the biology, you cannot really do it. You can solve the few problem like orchestration and all that, but how do you pick the right kind of context? How do you pick the right kind of information that the LLM needs, essentially? Because it's more about synthesizing that as well.
It's the product people are nowhere to go from this, because as with any research, any kind of research, it's based on experimentation, the scientific method, which means the results are all documented.
Yep.
And there'll be very many of them, because there'll be hundreds and thousands and even more than thousands of experiments in the end, after a while, of course. And yeah, you already mentioned there's always several hypotheses. Each one relates in some respect with the other. They are not independent, and they really come from the same background in the end, and the same problem to solve. And sometimes a different problem is solved by trying to solve the problem that is documented. It happened all the time. Of course, it's not often, but it does happen, and that's actually a breakthrough. Like the penicillin was discovered
exactly
by accident, but it was a real problem that was followed to be solved.
True.
And penicillin was discovered.
Yeah.
But it's all because of keeping your eyes open. So if the platform is that accessible and offers the observability, which is very mandatory for any kind of research, then all these details that will prove to be very important in some context
Exactly.
are essentially made visible by
Yeah.
the platform itself. And but it has to be structured, right? So the existing workflows that are already in place, wherever is Jira, something else. I mentioned Jira because I use Jira that much, but it can be anything else that does the same job, i.e., where is the hypothesis lined up? So everybody can see it, understand it. Where does it that fit in? If there's a project or some a research initiative or something, where does it fit with other hypotheses
Hmm.
about the same problem? Again, who is working on it? Let's call them user stories. They
Yeah.
can be called different, that are all interrelated and show the progress towards, or maybe the lack of progress. It's equally important.
Hmm.
That's where the platform will have to be embedded with. When I say embedded, easily accessible from a hypothesis in Jira or a user story, hot linked. And I'm not talking code repositories. These are researchers in biology, right? They not necessarily look at code and things like that, but
Yep.
they will look at evidence that is recording perhaps in a whatever the platform offers. Let's say it's a GitHub repo. I'm just saying GitHub repo is not just for code. It can be also, proper documentation, many things, which are version controlled by GitHub. So having a way in seamlessly from the existing workflows that they already have, this is a big deal
Right.
through that integration. And also just making a parallel with the legal domain here that Abhivardhan made.
Right.
Accessibility is more important than capability. It always is.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you should have rubbish capability which are widely accessible. That's not what I'm referring to. Of course, rubbish is rubbish, and the more accessible the rubbish is, the worse it is. I'm talking limited capabilities that work very well, but are very limited, but they're extremely accessible. That always beats hands down very rich capability, which is very reliable and all, but it's very hard to access.
Right.
It always is. And if you look at the legal field, what is one of the top problems of people that need lawyers? They can't get to a lawyer.
Exactly.
They can't get to a lawyer unless it's a tremendous effort put in, because they're not going to even know very well what part of the legal practice they should go. Is it commercial estate? Is it leasing? Is it what is that?
Yeah.
um, I faced that myself. I can't get in touch with a lawyer, which is for my problem, because I don't know exactly what it's like. For people, a law firm is a law firm.
Yeah.
Of course, the basic differentiation is it criminal law or not? Yeah, that of course, I'm not talking about that. But if you're, let's say, in property, is it commercial or is it not? You may say you have a property that you rent out and you're not a company. You may say it's not commercial. Yeah, but actually it is. But you don't know that because it's not at all obvious. So the same with medical researchers in biosciences, in life sciences, let's say. It's important for them to not scratch their head how to get on with the platform and the tooling somehow. And
Yeah.
that can be a direct way. I'm saying it could be a direct way, harder to do, but definitely more high touch, but also indirect through, say, a specialized consultancy that is, well matured in the domain. So they work with them, they explain the problem to solve,
Mhm.
and they only access the platform through that big consultancy firm, or it could be a niche consultancy. Size doesn't really matter as long as they know what they're doing and they
Yeah.
bring results. It can be actually an SME of sorts. And so that's how you get the distribution out to researchers. They don't have to think about exactly what tool to have. They just need about who can get us that, who can get us there. So it could be a consultancy or a system integrated type of firm, which essentially you license your capabilities with.
Exactly.
Whether it's consumption or licensing or hybrid, it's up to you. But they are bridging in between. But it's not just reselling your services. Actually, they bring value, right? It's not just that they building up and they integrate with all that they do. And so then the researchers don't have to actually think what to use. They just, we have these guys that were already working on, and now it seems that they have a solution for our problem to, let's say, speed up our research, not widely like 100 times 10x and all that nonsense,
Yeah.
but 50% double. That is a very, very big difference when you say 50% faster in research. We're talking many millions that are saved for a big firm a year, many millions. In fact, it could be tens of millions. For a small firm, it's still in the millions. So it's really is a big deal. 50% is really is a massive deal. So that's what I would say, the access to the platform, wherever it's straight on through you or indirect through other partners that they already work with the researchers. It's a very, very big, very big enabler. I would say number one enabler. Then, of course, is just to have it that is just work reliably. It has to be very reliable. And, then you can diversify the use cases from there. You had a few, it's working very well. You continue enhancing and so on, have the feedback from researchers. When they do, you address that as in any software development. But whatever the platform is doing, those 2 or 3 use cases is doing them very, very well and reliably. Therefore, it's very trustworthy. And so researchers are going to talk between them. They're going to talk. Word of mouth will spread. And more business will come simply without even much advertising. Because once, more than a few researchers use it and they say, well, man, this is, it saved us so much effort. It actually revealed certain traits that we didn't even know are present and shifted our research to a different direction where we had, and then they document the results. They will start writing papers about it and so on. And your platform is going to be referenced. This is what we're using, right?
Yeah.
They not necessarily mention your name, but they will mention the platform, exactly what how it is called and so on. And people will find out and start getting more and more like a chain reaction. So yeah, somehow to make it accessible would be, I would say, the number one enabler.
Yep. Agreed. So, I mean, I agreed with everything that you said. And that's the main thing for us also. How do you make it accessible and how do you make sure it works every time? Because if it doesn't work most of the time, many times, not useful at all. So that's what we are also working on. And it's more of an engineering problem, I would say, rather than being a specifically biology problem. But you do need a biology understanding. So would you like me to start with the presentation now? I made a short presentation for to have so that we can have a discussion about the bioethics related to.
Let's do that.
Amazing. I'm starting a slideshow. Let me know if that's visible to you.
Visible.
Yep.
Okay. So yes. So we're going to do like a basic understanding of how ethics in biology is slightly different than other corporates, because I'm only going to talk about like commercial projects and all that, like financial applications, software. It's very different. So it's going to be like in 3 stages. Essentially, the 4th one we're going to have a discussion essentially. So let me start setting the stage. So the main thing is ethics in biology is substantially different than any other fields because the stakes are much higher, and of course the human lives are at risk here. So that's why you would see the regulations in biology are very much stronger in that way. And with AI coming in, there's like a lot of stuff that would require regulations. I would say I'm not very pro regulation in most of cases, but I feel with biology, It is very sensible. But I will be devil's advocate at the end as well. So now with AI, it's becoming central to drug discovery, genome editing, clinical trials. I mean, it's being used. Everybody's trying to use it everywhere, essentially, in drug discovery to accelerate, drug identifying targets, identifying, potential drugs. So we get to trials faster. And then genome editing, I mean, we're still not there when it comes to genome editing at the scale that we are in drug discovery, but it's going to happen. CRISPR is there. There's people are, every other day I hear about something, some research coming out that's pushing us in that direction. And then clinical trials, because clinical trials, if you think about it, are one of the most expensive parts of drug discovery. They're very expensive, and so people are trying to find ways how you can include AI for patient recruitment, and so that essentially you reduce the cost of the clinical trial. And all of these things then lead to I think there's a message in the group.
Go on, go on, go on.
Okay.
No, no worries. No worries.
Let me know if somebody has a question so that I can stop the slideshow. Yeah. So then these, lead to unprecedented legal challenges that we have not really tackled before. Right. So let's say, unlike recommendation systems recommendation systems are everywhere. They're in your phone, they're in every application that you use. And then AI in finance. I mean, finance is also one of the high risk categories there, but it's still not as high risk as somebody losing their life, essentially. Right. And the errors in AI algorithms related to, biology or bio research can get to wet lab. They can affect human health, and most importantly, they can be irreversible. Because let's say you're working on an engineering organism to have some desired properties. Let's say you wanted to produce more alcohol because you're working in the alcohol industry, but somehow you mess up and it creates a pathogen, essentially. Then it's not, that's something that you started out with, and then it tends in because it's not good for the humankind in general, and then you're going into legal liability kind of a territory. Because since with AI the outputs are mostly hypothesis generating. That's what I also say about open bio. Like you're not going to create a drug here. You're going to test out a lot of hypotheses quickly. Essentially, that's the goal for us, right? So with AI, it's mostly going to be, the outputs are mostly going to be hypothesis generating, and they're not going to be deterministic. So then who bears the responsibility, essentially? So that's where the ethics part comes in. And that's why you guys, the lawyers, would like to get a better understanding as well. So who bears the responsibility? So let's say that's the example that I took, that you're designing a protein or a pathogen to have higher binding affinity for XYZ use case that you're working on. You're trying to design a drug, or trying to design an antibody, essentially, and that leads to toxicity in vivo. And when you're doing large scale trials, then it comes out, and a lot of people lose their lives. Then who's responsible, right? Who has the legal liability? The person who made the original protein language model, or the researcher who worked on it, or the institution that is conducting the clinical trials, or the data set. If you go straight back to the origins, is the data set curator responsible for this?
Ravi, on
Yeah.
that, if you go back to this, who is responsible? The regulation is moving towards who runs it, so who runs the model and applies the output, not just running the model. Of course, running the model may not necessarily result in any impact at all. You just run it, but you don't do nothing with the output. That is okay. But if it does something, you don't really have the right feedback loops, then that party would be responsible. So not knowing will not be an excuse, as in other parts of law. If you break the law and you say I didn't know, that doesn't stand in a court of law. That's it. It's your responsibility to know enough about it, just to know enough about it, so that you don't do harm.
Agreed.
So just by saying not knowing, not gonna absolve you. It's similar here. If the LLM has an output. That output is used in essentially devising a new treatment, let's say.
Right.
And it's a trial, of course, it's not going to be immediately open to the world. It's a trial with a set number of patients, but a number of those patients or trial patients will have life-changing impacts and things like that. Then who is responsible? The one that runs the trial. Yeah, they will say, but you sign here. Well, no, that's not going to be enough.
Yep.
Because when you sign, you have to understand well enough what's the risk. If that party, that medical body, didn't make that crystal clear, plain English, let's say, then they're responsible. But if they did, okay, that's a little bit different. So I think the process in general not gonna change, but where Gen AI or AI in general, but Gen AI in particular is involved, it will the responsibility will be legislated in the end to be of that party that actually put the output to work in the domain. Wherever they understand what the LLM does enough or not, or what that output could mean or not, won't absolve them if they create harm. That's where the regulation is moving. And I think it's the right thing to cut through all this ambiguity because, yes, as you say, is the one that does the algorithm, is the one that is responsible. Then is nobody responsible and people die, right? That we can't have that. So I think that's where it will go, which I think for the software side of things, it's a very positive. It's very positive because it doesn't eliminate the ethical responsibility and governance, but it makes it clear. What is the developer responsible for and what are the other parties involved along the chain responsible for? But we are not there yet, right? There are many important details to work out in the law. So I think it will be a while, but that's the direction to move.
Yeah. But one point I would like to mention with, AI coming in is that you might not be aware of the other, outputs that could come out, right? Because in this case, as I've mentioned, you're trying to design a binding affinity, and there's no way that you can, directly, if you know essentially that, it's going to cause toxicity. You have all the, goodwill when you're working, but then when something happens, the legal responsibility is on you. Would they not stop using it? Does that not limit, the use of the technology? Because then it's a little bit ambiguous, right? Don't you think?
Yep. So I have something interesting to add to that. So the Californian legislation, which is everyone pompously in the AI safety community talks about, that attack the frontier model, attack the small language model, directly regulate them while even getting on products. See, my issue with that approach always has been, I think I had a discussion with somebody called Bill French. Bogdan also remembers it a year ago. So long back. So what happened is the proposition which I had was that if you wish to even regulate, the first problem will be evidence law, which is what Bogdan and you are discussing. The second problem will be classification of AI, because either you classify in a way which represents the free market, the innovation community, because see, the global AI community is decentralized. People don't realize it. It is heavily decentralized. You can have somebody in Bengaluru working with somebody in Singapore. These two people can work with somebody in Austria, and these three people can then pitch to YC.
Yeah.
So in such case, what happens is classification of a system when something is not a stable use case, because it might be a deliverable, but it might be a deliverable in terms of its business logic and deliverable logic, which is good enough for product managers and developers to coordinate. But it is not something which is like a stable thing like nuclear technology or those kind of things which are bannable or highly regulatable. So a case management system is regulated, possible to be regulated in legal tech, because it's what is it? It's basic CRM's CMS kind of a thing with certain RBACs, and you give those rights, and you can just control them using data protection laws with some specific stuff, right? But here the thing what happens is that I think I'm not going to comment on. I don't think there are breakthroughs which are happening, but there are so many advancements that I think a better legal analogy that comes into my mind for liability is, and there's a funny analogy. It's
Mhm.
that 2019 Endgame movie scene where the reference by the ancient one was, okay, fine, you take this one stone, there will be multiple portals created. So it's happening with the AI trajectory also. You're doing something in annotation, you're doing something in labeling, you're doing something with agents. So many trajectories are being created. It's very weird that question of direct liability becomes hazy. But where it works is product regulation, service regulation, a bit of consumer liability beyond the point as to due care and that civil law stuff. But I don't think it don't makes no sense to directly go to the main entity, because the only logic that could work against a bigger frontier entity as an intermediary is economic law. Like, oh, you took away my trade secrets. That's what happened in this whole copyright saga in
Yeah.
Beijing. I keep referring that Beijing IP code reference. It's not like I have some special affinity with China or any country, but it's like it's logical. Like, it's what they say is, okay, this much resources is used. This is the technical aspect of the resources. There are aspects which are stakes involved. So therefore, this is the basis. So that's how I see it. But I don't know what you wish to add on to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have a few points, but I think will take them towards the end. I'll take the example of the UAI Act, because
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a few thoughts on that. Cool.
We should add.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before you add, welcome to Kailash. He joined late, as I said. People joined late. He is a chair of the AIDC. So, hi, Kailash.
Hi,
Happy
Abhivardhan.
to have you. Yeah.
Hello.
Uh,
Hello,
yeah.
Ravi. Hello, Bogdan.
Yeah. So, Ravi, on to you back. Yeah.
Yes. So I'll list down a few core ethical tensions in when it comes to bio and AI, so that we can move towards the discussion towards the end. I mean, data privacy and consent is obviously the most common thing that comes in discussions everywhere when you're talking about AI. And the thing with the one interesting thing with biological data is it's often reused far beyond its original consent context. So then the responsibility and the legal dynamic sort of changes, right? Because that's publicly available means ethically reusable, that you can, if it's publicly available for XYZ purpose, or I've collected a data set, I've put it out for XYZ purpose. Let's say I am studying coronaviruses, correct? Now, when I publish a data set, I'm intending it to be like, oh, don't do this, right? But then somebody takes it, trains their model to increase the pathogenicity, right? Now, that could be like problematic, exactly. So, and can consent given for diagnosis be reused for model training? So that's also one of the things that I think it's going to increase as we go, because currently there are not a lot of AI models being used for diagnosis, but eventually when that number increases, this is going to come in. So dynamic consent is one idea that I found out about, that you draft clauses covering unforeseen future as well, of using somebody's dynamic data, let's say, that is going to be trained by AI. And one other problem also is re-identification using AI. So let's say usually how GDPR, all these things usually work is you de-identify the data so that you cannot link back to it. But there's studies that using AI to do re-identification is very easy, basically. And now the point that comes back is, so there's now research towards synthetic data, which people say that is immune to re-identification attacks. But then what does synthetic data for biology look like? I cannot make up sequences, right? I cannot make up sequences
Yeah.
not real, right? So how does that work? And then another point is that AI can memorize biological patterns even if the raw data is deleted. So let's say you've put out a data set for XYZ sequences, correct? and XYZ use case. Now somebody's trained a model. Now we found out they're not, using it for the right purposes. You delete the data set, but AI essentially is, sampling the distribution itself. And if you sample it enough to generate sequence, it's you're going to get the sequence, data set, most of the data set back. So that's one of the, example areas I found interesting. Next is next is misuse. So this is one I was talking about, that the same AI that accelerates cures can lower barrier to biological harm, because protein design models that can design therapeutics can also optimize toxins, essentially. And then DNA synthesis optimization tools can speed up vaccine development, but they could also, be used by somebody else to construct pathogens, essentially. So now where does the responsibility lie for foreseeable misuse? And how I see it is, if I know that this is a potential misuse that could happen, should I not put it out in the open at all? Because if you don't put something out, some, area of work or some model out for everybody to use, then you're limiting the use case itself, right? You're slowing down research. But then if you put it out, who bears the responsibility? And because many of the times you would also not be aware of, unknown unknowns, essentially. Oh, this could be used for something like this as well, right? Because people are very creative when it comes to, these kind of stuff. I mean, that's why, if you take it, the big labs also, they're very serious about, LLMs being used for, biorisk, essentially. And then and another thing is, it was quite interesting to me as well when I found out about a few examples I'm going to show here. There is a lot of data set bias inherently in, how clinical trials have been done. But then there comes like algorithmic bias as well, because it's trained on unrepresentative data, and that leads to a biased AI model. And then legal exposure, because then, if a model performs poorly for, minority group, let's say I have trained a model to diagnose anemia, correct? Now the data that I collected is only from, let's say, Caucasian population. Now, but I want as many people to use my product. I take it out, I put it out, for everybody to use, correct? Now it goes to, let's say, Asian population, doesn't work as well. And if what that leads to is misdiagnosis, a lot of people are going to be misdiagnosed. I mean, in this case, it's pretty clear who bears the legal responsibility. But let's say the person who's training the data set, or the entity that's training the model, essentially, in my eyes, bears the responsibility. And then also somebody who's deploying the models as well. Next is, so these are a few interesting examples of how trial data has been extremely biased all across the world. So one example is the women are very poorly represented in any of the biological clinical trial data. In any of the clinical trials. And then if you look at this globally, majority of the population or the trial patients are white people, right? This is a clear over-representation. And then where are the clinical trials happening? Most of the trials are happening in North America or Europe. So when you're training data set, let's say you're training an algorithm to find the right fit for a XYZ in complication that you are studying or trying out a drug for. So eventually the models that you're training are going to predict the patient classes like this. Get somebody from North America who's potentially white and a male. I don't want to get into that part of the conversation here, but it's just that's how things have been. I mean, it's changing significantly, because these are data sets, the numbers that I'm showing are from recent time. So people do realize it, and I know from the community as well that people do realize that the trials are getting better. But somebody who's the model, because how I see it is somebody who's not from the field, Because you get a LLM engineer and you give him the problem, the data set, and you do it. Train me a model. They might not understand the nuances here. They might not know, certain populations are overrepresented, certain populations are not overrepresented, are underrepresented essentially. So they might make a mistake, train a model, performs well on their train and test data, but when it goes out, doesn't perform well. So who bears the responsibility in that case? Because the LLM engineer, who's just a computer scientist, do they bear the legal responsibility? And again, the black box nature of AI, right? Because biology, by the nature of itself, people demand some sort of interpretability, because you need to know what's happening. You cannot have an unexplained black box that takes data, biomarker data, and then tells you, oh, XYZ is the problem. You might have XYZ with a 95% probability. Because it will not give you a fixed number. It's not going to tell you you have it or you don't have it. It's just going to give you a probability. And then how do you decide the legal liability in this case? Right. So I feel these are complicated problems, just because you don't want to stifle the innovation as well. Because if you don't really care about the innovation, you can curtail everything. You can put laws. You can do create 10 different regulations and then put everything under it, and then nothing happens. You don't want to do that as well, right? Because let's say I'm a researcher, I want to work in the field, but then there are 20 different regulation. I have to go to the institutional review board for like everything. Then I would feel, oh, why am I even doing this, right? So that's my perspective.
And that's why regulation for automated systems in general,
Yeah,
particularly AI, and not just Gen AI, where it's non-deterministic output, it has to be layered as well and categorized as well as AI systems are categorized.
yeah,
Because one size doesn't fit all, and the use case, the industry, the applicability, the user population, so on, the all consideration to classify
yeah,
that system. And
yeah,
regulation must also be layered along similar lines, but in terms of the legal domain, of course, it is not a copy paste. We have this category for, I don't know, GPT, LLM, XYZ. Therefore, we apply. No, not like that. But it has to be layered, because doing experimentation in a lab should not be strictly regulated the same way as putting out that research out for the public consumption.
should be.
Of course not. There has to be some regulation, but by comparison would be minimal and mostly focused on the safety of the lab, not getting leaks out and things like that, the physical environment safety, and also the data safety, i.e., don't by mistake put it out on the open that will be exploited by bad actors to actually spread it.
Yeah.
So that's where the regulation should be concentrated, not exactly what those guys are doing that much. Sure,
Yeah.
some minimal things there, because you don't want people start to researching bioweapons in the in the garage. But I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But when it comes to trialing, the already regulation, I don't think we need more regulation. We need them to be tuned to the reality of the automated system that AI is. That's basically adapt them to reflect that reality, not show more and more and more to the point that nobody even understands them, not even specialist lawyers.
Yeah.
Like with the tax code. Like
Yeah.
not even lawyers understand the tax code very well, because it's so complex. Everybody is crushed by the complexity of it, and it doesn't work. We see that's one of the reasons the productivity in the West is subdued for about 25 years. One of the reasons. The tax code is way too complex, and everything crashes under it. But these are all good points. I would say this:
Mhm.
a researcher of any kind should always be able to explain why he or she has this or that output from their experiments. And the experiments is a tooling, but it's not just a tooling. It's also the scientific process that they use to extract that from the tooling. So it's, of course, it's a tooling, but how the tool is used is equally important. How is it measured? The methods of experimentation are equally important. And in the end, you have numbers.
Yeah.
The researcher should always be able to explain those numbers to a reasonable extent. It's not always possible to explain the whole lot, and it's not even necessary, but to a good enough extent that the risk is very well mitigated, and that assures that you actually know what's happening. So that has to be a practice. It in good scientists always follows that. They're not going to be able to explain it all from the beginning because they're still in experimentation. They have to figure it out. They have to run 100 more, 500 more experiments to figure it out for sure. But in the end, it's part of the aim. They have to explain why they propose that new protein, for example. Why they propose that? Why that? And not slightly different.
Right.
They have to get to that point because it has to be reproducible. And but how you're going to reproduce it? You have to explain it first, right? You can't reproduce something that you can barely understand. You have to really understand that very well, why you have that. And coming back to the platform side of things, the platform should be an enabler of explainability and not a bottleneck. We explain it up to now, but then we get to this black box. Like black, it's not really. It's this ambiguous platform. That, I mean, we don't know what those numbers come up, but they make sense.
Right.
Not really in the end. Not really in the grand scheme of things. They're not going to make sense because you can't show why they make sense. So if the platform is not becoming that bottleneck, it's just have enough explainability, just enough, then it's gonna be a very solid offering.
Yeah, I do agree with all these points. And I think because I've worked with the EU MDR regulation, I think it's a very well made document regulation. It's very well made, and I feel the opposite for EU AI Act. uh, because that's where I've seen they've rushed it. Because I feel regulation is something that needs to happen afterwards, sort of. I won't say like if something goes horribly wrong and then you bring in the regulation, but you need to see some signs of it before you even bring all these regulations in. But I do agree with all these points that you mentioned. So it's I wanted to bring this example of Salk, Jonas Salk, who is the inventor of the vaccine, polio vaccine, and how he tried it out was he gave it to himself and his family. Now I know that you cannot do that, in 2025. You cannot do that, but it's historic courage. You need to allow inventors to try things out. I feel so that I mean not this essentially that I also am aware of, but you need to give them a bit more leeway, essentially, is my point. And then over regulation is always a risk, right? Because there are articles about it, EUAI Act, because personally from me being involved in the field, Mistral, if I go back to 2023, Mistral was one of the companies who's just doing amazing work, right? But as soon
Yeah.
as the EUAI Act came, they've been not great. They've not been doing the great amount of work. I'm sure that they're still the biggest player in the European Union, but they could have been much better. They could have been much bigger, is how I see it. And I've tried to read through the EUAI Act, how categorize it, because Bogdan was talking about categorization. I believe the EUA MDR, medical device regulation, does categorization very well. On the other hand, the EUA Act is not great at categorization because those things are very arbitrary, because it categorizes on terms of teraflops of compute that you're using, what is the model size, all these things instead of capabilities, essentially. And that's very confusing for somebody who's working on it. Let's say I am working on training a model. Now, if they have XYZ teraflops of, compute, if you're using it, XYZ more compute to train a model, your, responsibilities and essentially increase. Now, do you think I'm going to use that much more regulation in an age where, scaling is everything? Because the past 2 years have been about scaling. You put in more and more compute to the problem, and then you get more and more outputs. That's what the US did, and that's why the US is leading the race. And then I agree. I'm not a big fan of regulation personally, but I feel in the field of biology, regulations are very important. Because the risks are much higher. It's not just software. It's much more important. People's lives are at stakes. So it needs like a balanced approach, as with everything. It should not be regulation. It should be regulation as well that you let people do anything. But you don't over-regulate. You make sure that things are accessible to everybody.
Yep.
And then the legal perspective, I had a few food for thought questions we could discuss. But I think we have mostly discussed these as we went along. So should harm be hypothesis generation, all these things we have already discussed. It was a good discussion. So that's it from my side.
Right. Yep.
Oh my.
Ravi, you send us the slides?
Yes, I'll definitely send it. I'll send them to
good
Abhivardhan.
pack. Yeah, it's a good pack.
Thank you.
I think so. Obviously, the EU AI Act has its problems because I'll tell you something funny that happened. Obviously, it has too much lengthy stuff, which doesn't address the problem. And I'll a little bit talk about the impact of over-regulation narrative also, because I think that is important for any AI research, and I think that also correlates with your field. So. In health and medical, there are certain proven ways to do so. So the market and the research lab ecosystems kind of understand among each other that, this is ethical enough to do, and that is comprehensible and foreseeable. Right. In the EU, the thing is the bureaucracy in the EU is kind of like the Indian bureaucracy. They're just much more sophisticated. Yeah. This is not me saying, this is Dr. Christina van Bergen, who is an European Commission expert in law and tech. She said it also. I mean, she did not make the Indian Babu comparison, but well, I got the analogy what she made on the inefficiencies. But so when we look at that, I think what happens with the EU is that, I mean, it's not good what happened with Mistral. They could have done so much. But so one impact problem which has come up with this over-regulation is that there are genuine issues in commercial law which definitely pile up around any sector, including yours, where data sharing, metadata sharing, even these things come under data governance. I mean, as somebody who has been in tech, like you or anyone, knows that data governance has certain life cycles, certain stages, so due care and certain due diligence. How do you process your data? Those things, even if there is no regulation, it matters to you. Because at the end of the day, it can bite back even under consumer protection laws, competition laws, and basic kind of laws. You don't, I mean, I think that we all should have data protection laws, but I'm saying that even if GDPR is not a standard, that's the case. But people don't realize that AI governance or ethics of AI kind of is a subset of data governance itself. So you have model testing. Within that, you can say there is an AI element associated. Something which is about technology deployment or data quality issues. If there is an algorithm training element, it directly comes there. But the question is not whether it comes. The question is whether classification is done well. And I think that is where the EU kind of messed up, because they came up with a non-binding 200-page document saying that, this is how we classify AI. And I read it.
Yeah.
Now, I get the sophistry there, okay? I'm somebody who loves poetry. At the same time, I also like legal and policy literature, so I read a lot. But a problem with that understanding with the EU had when I read it through was that it was very hazy. And it was trying to address a problem which did not exist. And that drives a lobbying narrative for these so-called consultants. And I know IAPP types. I just bash them in the think tank space all the time in India myself, and I don't care. Why? Because see, the problem with this is that the real ethics work, the real policy realities, which are important for market, if we won't focus on that, this segment of the service economy will crush innovators. And
Exactly.
even it will discredit real legal experts, real policy people who work hard and understand problems, right? So uh, I think that's why the EU is suffering a backlash. Like in the fintech sector in the EU, Stripe said that the reason we because of GDPR, and again GDPR is not a bad regulation; it's a good regulation. Okay, it's far better than what the AI Act of EU is. But even certain provisions of GDPR, they said that the kind of a business activity which Stripe had, there was something like a 18 or 14% reduction in terms of profits of their vendors who were associated with the payment gateway of Stripe. They are basically the Razorpay of Europe. So, in some way, it has to be a sensible way. And I think that's where I kind of used to like the Trump administration's earlier approach in April, which nobody talked about, that they came up with a contractual approach. So they were saying, okay, you are gathering data. In contract, you have to decide the IP aspects of it. You have to decide how exactly do you process, why do you do that. They give guidelines. Now, obviously, the post tariff imposition and whatever the president says, it is a mess. But that April memo on IP and AI was actually beautiful. And that was not what OpenAI was saying, by the way, that just remove copyright restrictions. It was very interesting that, yeah, you can do a balanced approach, you can negotiate contractually, you can talk about vendor ethics without, and they use the word vendor lock-in to their benefit of doubt. So, I think that's where I think the role of intermediaries also comes, because safe harbor laws everywhere, which is I think you should also know. I think it will be interesting for you. Safe harbor laws everywhere are in a backward position right now. It's not just the Indian situation; it's also the American situation. Or what are safe harbor laws? They are based on communication laws. What are communication laws? Telecom regulations. So everything in tech law comes from that. It's like constitution, right? Now, if you rewire that, if you don't understand what exactly is an intermediary, how do you establish liability? Liability for VPN providers and biotech platforms are not the same. But then a statutory basis has to be clear. So I think that's where I think it's great that we had this dialogue. It's a shame that a lot of people missed it, although we had registrations, but fine. I think they'll binge watch it on YouTube, and maybe it's also year ending, so a lot of people, despite the Indigo saga, are on a vacation mode.
Yeah.
So
I think people are on holidays. It's a holiday season.
probably that's the case. But I'm happy that Bogdan liked it, and I'm happy he joined. Kailash, few words you wish to add? So Kailash, just quick introduction. Apart from his chairpersonship thing, he is an IP law guy at the Delhi High Court. He works closely with judges, and he has been chair of the AIDC for some time now, more than a year, and he's been very helpful in our community efforts as ISAIL in Delhi in some shape or form. So, Kailash.
So, hi Ravi. This
Hello.
was a really very interesting session because it's also related to my research field as well. My specific work is related to patent matters in New Delhi High Court. So I'm working in intellectual property division right now. So it was totally relatable to me. I can understand what are the issues you have been raising. There is one question which came into my mind that when a drug is being in the final stage by any pharma company, any farm or the research lab, then before commercializing that drug, they need to go through the clinical trials to get approval from the government, and there is different procedure for every country.
Right.
So usually when the drug is related to, have a potential impact on your other aspect of life rather than the issues or the problem which the drug is dealing with,
Yeah.
Let's say in example we were dealing with in patent matter. It was drug to cure the SMA, cerebral. I forgot SMA. The name of the disease is SMA. I don't know much about that, but the issue was that it was a very these drugs are called orphan drugs, like the drugs which are very few in numbers and that cure a very rare diseases, and they're very fatal diseases, like
Yeah.
for which there are no other cure. So there are like 2 to 3 companies whose medicine were in the market right now. So it's usually like when the drug was ready, they patented the drug, and then it come to the clinical trial stage. It takes a very long time, maybe 2 years, 3 or 4 years, sometimes 5 years to complete the clinical trial, and then it get accepted by the government. Then you just commercialize the drug. So in such drugs, such time matters a lot. If suppose there is a clinical trial, a drug went through the stage of 5 years of clinical trial, and then it came into the market. By the time there were like maybe millions people have died because of their diseases. And if the 5 times year has been reduced to, even if let's say to 4 years, then in that 4 year, for 1 year's period, you can save a lot of lives.
Yeah.
So how do you think this use of AI development, or specifically the Gen AI development, can
Speed that.
can reduce that clinical trial time?
Yeah.
How
I
do
mean,
you see?
yeah. So you raised a very good point, and there's already a lot of discussion in the field regarding this, that clinical trials are too expensive and they take a long time. Because as you said, so many people would die by them, right? But I think, as far as I am aware, for at least rare diseases, because if there's no treatment, what they're going to do is, to the patient, they're going to enroll them in a trial, so that if there's a chance that this drug works, they'll get that drug. But how we see it is, people are trying to reduce animal trials also. I think FDA recently passed regulation that you don't need to do animal trials, animal phases essentially, and you can directly go to human trials. And then even before that, I think there's a lot of work being going on in the virtual cell field. You want to essentially know everything before you get to the trials, and then you do them much faster, as we saw with the COVID example, right? Everything we did it very quickly, right? So I mean, it's possible. It's just that you don't want to risk it. It's essentially boils down to human lives, because at least in clinical trials, human lives are at stake, right? So you don't want to rush it as well. But we did see it in the trials that we did with COVID. Essentially, in 1 year, 2 years, all the phases were done. I mean, not the fourth phase, but at least we got to third phase, and then most of the countries, they gave out licenses to do it, release the drug. So I mean, it's possible. It's going to be like a combination of the both things, that the AI advances are there, and then tech also advances. We become more efficient. We can do a lot of the work in computers, simulations and everything. But then regulations as well. If the regulations don't agree with what we're trying to do, it's useless, because you have to. I can say anything, I can believe in anything, but if the regulations don't believe in that, my point is moot.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Great to conclude. And maybe I think we'll try something like this later on, but maybe post vacations. But I think a very crazy week for me in terms of these joint dialogues. One we had with Extensity AI, and this one with you for Open Bio. But I think it's a great start, because last year also in the AI and creativity side, we did with Pratik Arora. So he works in Indo-Futurism for his initiative called Indo-Futurism, which is like community thing of its own sort, like a movement in artistic sides. So it's great how this year concluded in terms of these joint sessions at ISAIL.
Hey,
But
I'm the concluding person.
yep.
Thank you.
And yeah. and I think that's such a cool thing. Great. So we end with this, and I think we'll see how comments come up accordingly and how people react to this. But I think it was great having you, Ravi. We'll share you the details once it's out. But I'd like to definitely chat with you once the session is over for a brief. So thank you
Sure.
everyone who came.
Yeah, this is good work. Ravi, if you have a demo of the platform in
Right.
one or the other use case, but like a demo that you have in a lab or something,